I call the meeting to order. I will begin by acknowledging that we are in Treaty 1 territory and the traditional homeland of the Métis people. The panel today, on my far left is Ed Sawatsky, on my left is Linda McFadden. I'm Robert Buss. The assessor is Jennifer Martins, and the secretary today is Carla Walshaw. We will be hearing applications for revision of the assessment roll in accordance with the Municipal Assessment Act. The matters for which revision is requested have been described in each application, and we will limit discussion to those matters. The statements that applicants or the assessor make at this hearing are sworn testimony, and anyone speaking to the matters must be sworn in. Be advised that comparisons of assessments of properties are not considered evidence of market value by the Board of Revision. The Board of Revision is appointed annually by Council and is independent of it and the City Administration. It makes its decisions on the basis of the evidence provided at this hearing and issues a written order that will be mailed to all parties as soon as possible. Please note that the Board's decisions with respect to an application may be appealed to the Manitoba Municipal Board if the matter pertains to assessed value or classification, or to the Court of Queen's Bench if the matter pertains to the application of exemptions from taxation. Should you wish to appeal, information on how to do so will be included with the Board's order. With respect to the hearing process, I will confirm the matters to be addressed with each applicant following the swearing in. We will then have the assessor's testimony followed by questions that the other applicants may have, and then the applicant's testimony followed by questions. Each side will have an opportunity to summarize if they wish. Once all of the evidence about an application has been brought forward, the applicant may leave. The process will repeat for each item on the docket today. The session will close after all applicants have been heard, and the Board will deliberate in private and make its decisions. So you will receive the order by registered mail as soon as possible. As information, all public hearings are live streamed, recorded, and will be a part of the public record.
Please state your name.
Jennifer Martins.
Do you swear the evidence you'll present today is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you. Please state your name.
Trevor Smith.
Do you swear the evidence you'll present today is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
Begin with item number 1 on the docket today, 375 Assiniboine Avenue. When you're ready,
Yes.
Ms. Martin.
This is roll number 120926 00000. The assessed value is $8,752,000. This is divided between $8,502,000 at class code 20 with a liability status of grantable, and $250,000 class code 40 with liability exempt. This building was built in 1977 with 124 suites and 31 outdoor parking spots. On page 2, we have the income value summary. It shows that there are 90 bachelor suites and 35 two-bedroom suites with an average monthly rent per unit at $669.02. If we look under the apartment property class type, there is a vacancy rate of 3%, an expense rate at 56.33, and a cap at 5, giving us the $8,502,000. And on the retail side, there's a gross potential rent at $19,380 with a vacancy rate of 6%, shortfall rate at $6.50 with a 2% expense rate and 6.9% cap, giving us the $250,000. If we go over to page 4, There are rental comparables for the apartment units. There are 4 comparables ranging in rent from $678 to $880. The suite mix on these is different. It's not very standard to have only bachelor and 2-bedroom suites. So there is a variation on the suite mix. At the bottom of page 4, there are comparable leases for the retail portion. There are 3 comparables ranging in rent from $11 to $13. Page 5 is the cap rate information from the city. And page 6 is capitalization rate evidence. This is a sample of actual sales, and the purpose for showing these individual capitalization rates is simply to illustrate the accuracy of the model and substantiate the model-derived capitalization rates. They're not meant to be comparable specific to the subject property. Page 7 is Municipal Act excerpts, and page 8 and 9 is the information that we received from the owner of property about income and expense, with page 10 being an overhead picture of the property. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Smith, do you have any questions of the appellant?
Yes, a few, I guess. As you mentioned, it is unusual to have 73% of the units in building being bachelor. That's fair to say.
I don't know about the 70% part, but
That high ratio of bachelors.
yes.
Yeah. What would be a more standard split? One and 2 bedrooms are more typical. Is that correct?
I think with some of the, with a lot of the Manitoba housing properties that we've looked at, and a lot of the properties in the downtown area, it's not necessarily that bachelor is uncommon, it's that having 2 bedrooms mixed with bachelor is uncommon. It's more common to have bachelor in 1 bedroom or 1 bedroom and 2 bedroom mixed. I find that this one's uncommon because there are no 1-bedroom apartment buildings, or suites in the apartment building.
Right, and a high degree of bachelors as the split overall. Would that not be fair to say?
From what I've been looking at that's under appeal, I respectfully would disagree, because
Okay.
with the Manitoba housing, there's a fair amount of bachelor suites.
So that would be specific to Manitoba housing then?
Or to the downtown area, just the ones that I've seen, it's,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, the capitalization rate that's used of 5%, that's model driven, of course.
That is model driven.
And what would be the main driving factors of the 5%? I see that it's towards the bottom end of the 20th to 80th percentile at 5.0, just above the 4.9 20th percentile.
Yes, that would be based mostly on size, area, age. Really that's mostly the age and the location in the city and the size of the property.
Okay. So this this property has some main floor space that is treated as commercial. Just looking at the, and I'm not discussing this with regard to rent, but more with regard to the overall value of the property, the gross floor area for the subject is considerably smaller than the comparables that are provided on page number 4 on a per suite basis. Gross floor area per unit.
Yes.
Okay. And I do have rebuttal that I have to provide, Mr. Chair, whenever you would like to have that. I will talk about it for 3 minutes tops, because we've all heard it. But I
Well,
do
we
have
do-
to submit it into evidence, essentially.
Yeah, so we'll finish the questions and then you can do
Okay.
the rebuttal.
Those
How's
are all
that?
of my questions, thank you.
Okay, thank you. We'll see if the panel has any questions. Mr. Swansky?
Are you aware of any improvements made to the building?
No,
No, you're not aware, or there haven't been any?
I'm not aware.
Okay. Do you know when the property was last inspected?
No, I do not.
I'm curious as to why you would not have checked that, given that it's under appeal.
When I don't necessarily look at when it's been inspected, I look at what has been reviewed.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. McFadden?
So this is entirely model-driven then? No
Yes.
overrides?
No overrides.
No overrides. And it's presumably the age that's driving down the cap rate? I mean,
Well, the cap rate is always derived by a variety of factors. So with some properties, with all the properties, it's a combination of different factors, including the big ones being age and location and size.
okay, thank you.
Thank you. So on the back page, which is the building that we're talking about? Is it the tall one with the sort of,
No, it's 375. So if you see Smith Street and where it intersects with Assiniboine, and you go up to the square with 375. So it's the taller one that is facing Assiniboine, not the big one here that's facing Heart Rate Park. Yeah.
well, this is 340, we're dealing with 375. So could you go over that again? Smith Street, I see Smith Street.
Smith Street, and where Assiniboine intersects with Smith Street,
Yes,
and you follow Assiniboine up to the square that has the 375 in the middle.
yes.
That's the property. So it's the one that has the longer side facing Assiniboine.
Okay, there's a 15 on there?
There is a 15 because that's for the next,
Okay, I get it now. Okay, so it's this building. Okay, so this is Manitoba Housing.
yes.
Okay, that's all my questions at the moment. Thank you.
Okay, I'll proceed here. If we've all got the document in front of you here, I think we've all seen this probably several times by now, so as promised, I will be brief. The point of this is with reference to the cap rate comparables that the city has provided for multifamily on page number 6 on their chart. That being the first three, 191 Roche, 394 Talbot, and 285 Maxwell Place. As I've stated before the board here several times, these three sales were purchased for renovation, were subsequently renovated, and had the return to the purchaser significantly boosted by an increase in the rental rate to each of the units. Now, the point of that is that under the IAAO, get the correct terminology here, yes, the International Association of Assessing Officers, by their documentation, this sales that are significantly renovated after purchase do not meet the requirement for inclusion in ratio studies. I've gone through this several times, so I will not do it again here today. The issue with income-producing properties is not so much the physical condition. It is the physical condition in that then generates a higher revenue amount, which is what the properties were purchased for. So by buying that property, immediately renovating it and changing the income stream for that property, it does not meet the IAAO standards for inclusion in ratio studies. The documentation that I've provided in the rebuttal evidence there is publicly available information, and again, it's with regard to the first three comparables, 191 Roche, 394 Talbot, and 285 Maxwell Place. I won't walk you through this. I'll simply point out again that if you go through the documents, you can see that each of these properties was purchased for renovation and was then subsequently renovated, and their income stream was increased significantly following the renovation, so therefore they do not meet the qualifications for inclusion in the ratio studies. And the point of all of this is we have 3 out of 4 sales here that would not meet the standards for inclusion in capitalization rate study, essentially, and yet they're provided by the city. So those are included in the city's study that they have on cap rates. So as we know, in the city of Winnipeg, many properties in the last number of years have been purchased and subsequently renovated and had their income stream significantly increased. So the chances are that there's not just 3 of these properties in the city study, but a significant number of them that would then drive down, obviously, the cap rate overall as a result of the inclusion of these particular sales that should not be included in such a study according to the IAAO standards itself. The 4th property there, 333 Ward, you've all heard endlessly about that. I will leave that up to your discretion. As stated before, an affidavit has been provided in the last cycle by the purchaser that they bought the property at a 5.5% capitalization rate based on their analysis. So that is my rebuttal, and I'm happy to answer the questions on it.
Okay, thank you. We'll see if the assessor has any questions on it.
Yes. Do you have the first pages of the questionnaires for 394 Talbot or 285 Maxwell?
No, I'm not the agent that represents those clients, and that information wasn't provided in the publicly available information.
Okay. Is it safe to assume that had those first pages given the same information as the emails received September 25th, 2019 and September 26th, 2019, that they would have been included?
That I couldn't comment on because, again, I don't represent that client and I don't have that information. And obviously what the What the owner or their property manager puts down, I have no control over.
Okay. I'm going to assume that since the first mailer that we have says that it's bought for with upgrades in mind, and the following two don't include that information, that perhaps that was missed. And if you look on my page 7, we have municipal act excerpts. So providing information that does not say it's purchased for upgrade at the time of the mailer when we need the information, and providing information, emails dated after this appeal season started in 2019, which is post-reference. We look at section 54.3.1, that they're providing inconsistent information, where in response to a request for information or documentation under clause 16.1c, a person provided information that was substantially at variance with information that he or she presented at a hearing. The presiding officer of the board or panel may order that the information presented by the person at the hearing is not to be considered by the board or panel in making its decision. Did you take that into account when looking at emails provided post-reference as opposed to the documentation that was provided to the city when the city was looking at this information for its use?
I did, yes. So I guess I have a couple of comments with regard to that. So in again, this is not a client that I directly represent, so I don't have any input on what's included on any mailers that they provide. The issue with regard to inconsistent information, so we have an owner and or their property manager that as a very, very, very small part of their working life has to complete these forms for the city, which they duly do and to the best of their ability and send it in. Following that, the city does some analysis, includes information in all of their appeals, all of their appeal briefs on these particular sales, and is now asking for that this be considered inconsistent information. The information that's being provided now and the emails that are included in here, and the other information is information that had to be confirmed after the fact once the city had published this new information with regard to the capitalization rates in their briefs. So I don't really see that the application of that particular inconsistent information is fair and equitable with regard to this. Looking at, in fact, it seems just particularly punitive. If you ask me, it doesn't appear to represent the spirit of that. I can see if you had information submitted where the figures that were submitted in the income and expense were then changed in some fashion and brought forward in a different manner, that would be inconsistent information. This is not inconsistent, it's just additional information. And had to be requested after the fact. Now, I guess my point about this is it's fairly easy to do the research in looking at whether a property has been renovated or not by looking at the advertisements for those properties to see if they say that they've been renovated and if the rents have dramatically increased. It's very clear that those have been done. We do that in the public sector, and I know that you yourself are particularly busy, so this is not directed at you, but certainly with the number of sales that are out there, a quick check to see whether properties have been renovated is something that could be done.
Do we have either of the people who wrote those emails here so that we can question them on their knowledge of when they knew that they were renovating them, and what the extent of the renovations are, or for any of the information, so that we can also find the other information. Or to check that the question was posed to them in order to get the answer that they were purchased specifically for renovation.
I'm afraid that I do not request people to come to my hearings and appear that are not people that I particularly, that I represent myself, so I think that would be, they wouldn't come, I don't imagine, because they have a busy life, and this is not germane to what they're doing. And that's, yeah, that would be a stretch certainly to ask a property manager to come and appear with regard to one email that they answered from an outside source. The information in the rebuttal document, and I was hoping that we'd get through this relatively quickly, but I think there, the first one has the information with regard to 191 Roche. Says it was purchased with renovations in mind, suite upgrades,
Where
and then
does it say,
following
where
that,
does it say it was purchased with renovations in mind?
on page number, the very first page inside the cover page.
Okay.
If you look at number 16, at the bottom, did you or do you intend to make major repairs or renovation or improvements rather to the property? Yes. If yes, what type? Suite upgrades. They have an amount there.
$100,000?
That, upon purchase, that was what their estimate that they may spend on it. We don't know what they spent on it, obviously. The information following that is from the same time frame. You can see the low rental rates that the property was originally getting, and subsequently they are higher than that. Following that,
I think maybe you've answered your question.
Okay,
I
great.
think that,
I'm happy to leave it there.
okay.
In the IAAO standards, it says with, in regards to significant upgrades, that leaves a lot up to the person to decide on their own what significant upgrades are. With these upgrades, was it increasing the income significantly enough to exempt it from, to make it that it shouldn't be included in a cap rate study, or is it fair to say that someone may perceive that it's within the IAAO standards, that it's not a significant enough change in the property to warrant it being excluded?
So let's look at 394 Talbot for clarity on that. Pardon me. So that would be, there's an email, it's numbered page 14, stating that it was purchased for renovation, and following that, page 15, you have the income and expense mailer for that property this is prior to renovation, so you can see the monthly charges for the 1 and 2 bedrooms, $537, $653. Flip over to page 16, 394 Talbot, subsequently renovated. You can see it says totally renovated, including new kitchens and bathrooms, new blinds, new refinished hardwood. And the rents are now $800 and $900. So yes, I would say that that would certainly meet the threshold of significant change.
With the significant increase in the repair and maintenance, is it really a significant increase if we're reducing the income by increasing the maintenance?
I don't follow your question, I'm afraid.
Did you do never mind. Nothing, thank you.
Any panel members? Linda, question? On the rebuttal evidence?
On the rebuttal. Do you have information whether these units are actually got exemptions under the residential tenancies branch? Because that would be an indication, would it not, of significant investment in upgrades.
We did,
That would be the reason for which they would be doing it, correct?
that would be the reason that they would be doing it, to get the boost in income. So again, I don't represent these particular clients, so I don't get their application residential tenancies, but we did check the rental amounts following renovation, and as you can see with 394 Talbot there, that would be an above guideline increase.
That would have had to have been approved, correct?
That's correct.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Sawant
No
again.
questions.
Just a little sort of question about what the assessor was asking on page 11. They say they plan to spend $100,000. That's in the big scheme of things with the $3,725,000 building. $100,000 isn't really a major renovation. Is it? Would you agree that it isn't a major renovation?
I would say that it would, we don't know that 100,000 is what they spent, first of all, that was their initial estimate. So I have no accounting of what they actually did following that. But if it's spent exclusively on, say, kitchens and bathrooms, which is what people appear to truly care about these days, then the income stream would likely be lifted significantly. So if the amount you spend drives a significant change to the revenue, that's really what you're looking at. It's not, you spent $100,000 on it and it's, worth $200,000 more. It's what change to the revenue stream did that produce?
Okay, that will take care of the rebuttal evidence. If you would like to give us your presentation on this property, please.
Okay, so some of my comments will carry forward for all of the Manitoba housing properties today. I think we have one that is not Manitoba housing, which is on River Avenue, so obviously that will be the exception, but some of this I will probably only run through once to save us some time.
Okay.
375 Assiniboine Avenue, built by Manitoba Housing in 1977, actually located on Assiniboine Avenue. If you look at my page number 3, you can see a bit of additional information with regard to the property. As mentioned earlier, we have a total of 89 bachelor units and 35 two-bedroom units, which I believe my calculation showed equated to 73% bachelor units. Now, Manitoba Housing builds their properties to accommodate low-income individuals and families in the marketplace. So they try and obviously house the maximum amount of people in the space that is available to them on which to build. So one thing that, as well as meeting the individual needs, so there's obviously a need in housing, Manitoba Housing itself, for bachelor units. And what you'll often see is a very high proportion of bachelor units in their properties. Now, outside Manitoba Housing, this is not common at all. It's not that there aren't bachelor units out there, but you're not going to see a greater proportion of bachelor units. In fact, you'll probably see, if anything, at a maximum 20%, I would say, suggest at the very high end of the range. Typically, investors are not enamored with bachelor units. 2 reasons, I guess. Obviously the revenue that you can generate from a bachelor unit is less than you can generate from 1 and 2 bedrooms, and as well, you're getting typically a more transient population going through bachelor units, which can lead to more wear and tear, etc. So the subject property itself, we do have some photos of it here. Beginning on page number 4, you can see the exteriors. There is some significant spalling on the exterior of this facility. You can see the lobby of it. This particular unit that's shown at the bottom of page 5 had to have some renovations done due to damage in the unit. You can see some evidence of that on the following pages. Flooring, wall, etc. So there is some new materials going in there. More so, you can see the relatively small size of the bedrooms that are in place there. If you look at the top of page 7, it's quite small. And on page 7, you can see the bathroom that we're looking at. Now, this is not to say that every unit in the building is, beaten up as such. That's not what we're getting at here. It's that the property would be in need of. It has deferred maintenance with regard to the suites themselves, and does need some upgrading. So the site is shown on page 8 and the location on page number 9. We can move on from there into the valuation itself, beginning on page 11. Let me just confirm here. For the subject property, given the location, size of the units, build out, etc., we were in agreement with the City of Winnipeg's gross rental rates with regard to the property. This is a rental income of $1,003,530, which is an average of $674 per unit. Now, if you look at the suite mix, again, we're dealing with mostly bachelor units with a smaller degree of 2 bedrooms. For comparative purposes, the property generated on a rent geared income basis just over $400,000. Obviously, we can't base our evaluation on that, but just for comparison sake. There is laundry revenue for this subject property, and we have, of course, included that in our analysis. So moving on to the expense side of the equation, we have used 3% vacancy rate in our analysis, and we have also provided you with our stabilized expense allowance. We look at prior 3-year history of expenses for each property and go through a stabilization exercise for them to arrive at a stabilized expense allowance for the subject. Now, we came out to $543,303. This is with the inclusion of a property management allowance, which Manitoba Housing does not include in their accounting of expenses as provided to the city. So the $543,303 is slightly lower than what the city has allowed as far as expenses go. Moving on to capitalization rate. As I said at the beginning, these comments will carry forward for the remainder of the Manitoba Housing properties, and we'll run through it relatively quickly here. The top of page 13 has some text that I'd just like everybody to focus on briefly here, and I'll run through a little bit of it. With regard to capitalization rate, determining market value for affordable housing properties for property assessment is difficult, as the properties do not typically transact in the marketplace. When they do transact, they're not based on the in-place income and expense. Therefore, there's no directly comparable sales. Social and affordable housing properties can't legitimately be compared directly to standard market apartments as well, because they have considerable restrictions and burdens not present in the standard marketplace for market apartments. These being rental income restrictions, smaller rental pool, additional operating expenses, typically physical condition of the properties tends to be poorer than the standard market. Size of units obviously tends to be smaller, and then there can be obviously disposition restrictions upon sale with regard to tenants being in place, as well as any other issues regarding funding, etc. Mr. Richard Polton is an expert in this field in the United States. He's an accredited appraiser in the US, and he has published a book specifically regarding this, Valuation and Market Studies for Affordable Housing. And in it, he states, developing a market-derived cap rate for an income-restricted property begins with an analysis of the available rates for similar unrestricted properties. Then these rates are adjusted based on the risk factors that an investor would consider in developing a cap rate. The result is a cap rate based on market factors and associated risks. In the final analysis, property tax assessment must take into account the public purpose of the project, the overall benefits and burdens, and the restricted nature of the operating rents. So all that being said, you look at property A in the marketplace, right next door to property B. They're the same size, same number of units, etc. One of them is public housing, and the other is a market apartment. There are issues with regard to the public housing that would cause a purchaser, an investor, to apply a premium to the capitalization rate that they would use in acquiring that particular asset. Moving on from that, we've included our own cap rate study at the middle of page number 13. These are properties that transacted in the marketplace that were purchased for the in-place income stream. They were not purchased for renovation, as they had either already been renovated or were not in need of renovation. The cap rate range that we're seeing here is from the low end of 5.44% from 333 Ward, this being the property that has come up numerous times before the board, up to 6.6, 6.65%. Now, these particular properties are not going to be individually compared, not meant to be individually compared to the subject. It's simply a representation of what the marketplace is paying for market apartments. So they will vary in terms of size and comparability to the subject. Beyond that, we look at the major market participants of C.B. Richard Ellis and Colliers, two of the main commercial market brokers in the market. Essentially, what they are showing in their capitalization rate information between the 2016 and 2018 cycles is essentially a flat line with regard to cap rates for market apartments. If we look at the Winnipeg situation, in the 2016 information from Colliers, for high rises we have 5 to 5.75% from the Colliers information in 2016. 2018, 5 to 6%. If we look at the C.B. Richard Ellis information, we're looking at 5 to 5.75% in both 2016 and 2018. Now, point to remember with regard to both of those studies from CBRE and Colliers is that these are publications put out by those brokerages on a national basis, and they're looking at investment grade properties. And if you look at their determination of what meets the investment grade property criteria, it would be the upper end of the market specifically. So you'd be looking at properties that would draw interest from a very high degree of investors that would be sophisticated and know the marketplace well. So the ranges that they're showing there are in that 5 to 6% for that investment grade property. Now, the subject property is obviously not investment grade. We're looking at public housing, and we have all of the issues that have been discussed with regard to that asset class. So we have extremely high degree of bachelor apartments as well, not terribly attractive to investors in the marketplace. You have the condition of the property, you have issues upon disposition. We've applied a premium to the upper end of the cap rate range for the subject at 6.25%. to arrive at our final market value of $6,908,000. The exempt portion of the property we're not contesting. And the addenda materials include the income and expense form, the publications from the two brokerages, as well as at the back of the brief, we have decisions from other Manitoba housing properties, as noted there at 6.5%, 6.25%, 6%, 6%, etc. You can flip through those at your leisure, but basically everything is 6% and above in decisions that are included there for you. And I'm happy to answer questions.
Very good, thank you. We'll see if the assessor has any questions to begin with.
No, thank you.
Mr. Swatsky?
Are you aware of any sales where public housing has been converted to private?
I am, yes. Would you like to hear about them?
Give me one or two.
Okay, so there are a couple of instances where property that was held by Manitoba Housing but operated by another agency, 300 Selkirk coming to mind, where ownership has been transferred to that other agency. So Winnipeg Housing and Rehabilitation Corporation, I think, is the one that took over 300 Selkirk. It's the Polish Senior Center on Selkirk Avenue. So that one transacted. It wasn't bought on the basis of the revenue that was generated by it. The 185 Smith Street property that you've probably all heard about that had 2 floods. It's located just south of the police station. I'm going off of memory here, but something like, I'm going to get it wrong, but 390 units or 290 units, something like that. And the majority of those were bachelor units. Now, it was purchased by a developer, and they are entirely changing the block. They're putting in commercial on the main floor, and they've reduced the number of units in the building, but they're making them luxury. So you're getting kind of a loft apartment effect in many of them, and the rental rates are going to be very high on a per square foot basis for the Winnipeg marketplace.
So what happens to the cap rate in situations like that?
Well, that's the thing, is there isn't really a cap rate to be developed out of those, because they're not purchased for for any revenue that they're generating. In the Smith Street instance, there were no tenants because the building had been flooded twice, and Manitoba Housing had to take all of the tenancies out of there, so there was no basis, and it would be rent geared to income in the first place. So there are no cap rates to be developed out of them, unfortunately.
Thank you.
Linda?
I have no questions.
A question on page 13 of your brief, cap rates. First question overall is, did you check these to see if any of them had been purchased with renovations in mind?
We did check on each of these as to the state of the property upon purchase, and they were already renovated, so there was no further renovation to to be done to them, or they were, in the case of 333 Ward, not in need of renovation because it was built in 2006, so you have a new product essentially.
Okay. Some of these buildings, let's say number 4, 331 Marion Street. What kind of a building is that? You know, is that a 3-story walk-up apartment or?
It was a walk-up on Marion, yes.
Okay. And Jameson would be the same thing, a
Yes.
small building?
That's right. Most of them are relatively small, and I mean, much of the apartment stock in Winnipeg is of that 3-story walk-up variety. The only large one there obviously being the 333 Ward, built in 2006.
And for 333 Ward, you're saying the overall rate was 5.44, where on the assessor's brief, she is using 5% of Ward. That's the big difference there. Is that correct, in Ward?
It is, and I don't want to get into Ward too much, because I think we've all heard many times about it. I think it's been shown that with the city's information, it actually comes out to a 5.25% cap rate, I believe. And as mentioned, the affidavit provided by the purchaser and the information that we were able to discuss with them was that they bought it on a basis of 5.44 or 5.5%.
Okay. One more question. Regardless of the IAAO, if you were buying a building that needed renovations, and I assume it needed renovations, that's why you plan to do them when you're purchasing, wouldn't that drive down the price, which would increase the cap rate?
If you were to, so I just want to make sure I understand your question. So if the building's in need of renovations,
Mhm.
and so you're going to
Pay less, the owner,
pay
the
less
purchaser
for it.
would pay less, which in turn would put the cap rate higher.
Yeah.
But you're saying that
It
the
depends on the specific transaction, I guess I would say. In some instances, a purchaser may be willing to pay more if they see value that the vendor doesn't necessarily. Or as you state, they may pay less for it, and the vendor may be willing to accept less for it if they know that the condition of the property is, below average. So I don't have a solid answer for you there.
Okay, more speculation on my part, I guess. I think that is all my questions. So that will conclude item number 1. And I believe item number 2 has been withdrawn.
Yes, it has.
Item number 2 will be withdrawn. We will move on to item number 3, 555 Ellis Avenue. Whenever you're ready.
This is rule number 1305069250. The value of this property is $9,017,000. This is again divided into two parts. We have 8,105,000 class code 20 residential with a tax liability status of rentable. And we have 912,000 class code 60 with liability grantable. This building was built in 1979. We have an effective year built of 1989. There are 118 suites with 37 parking spots. If we look on page 2 for the income value summary, this property has 104 bachelor suites, and 14 one-bedroom suites, giving us 118 suites with an average monthly rent per unit at $657.04. Looking at the apartment stream, we have a 2.6% vacancy rate, a 55.28% expense rate, and a 5% cap rate. That gives us the $8,105,000. And right beside it on the retail stream, we have a 6% vacancy rate, $6.50 for shortfall rate, 2% expense rate, 8.5% cap, giving us the $912,000. Page 3 gives a bit of an outline. It shows that we have 118 residential suites with the $657 and 4 cents average rent, and the 6 retail units with rent per square foot ranging from $14 to $15.33. And on page 4 we have rent comparables. The top portion is the rental comparables for the residential portion, which range from $630 to $731. And on the bottom, we have the comparable leases for the retail portion, with rents ranging from $13.88 to $15.99. On page 8, we have the income and expense information, and page 9, we have a picture of the property. If you look at the top of the property, the top of the page, the map picture, you'll see that this building is, I guess not entirely unique, but somewhat unique because it spans over the, what's that, McMicken Street? So it's along, it faces Ellis, and the 2 red squares are both involved in this property. If you look on the bottom picture, you'll see that it is that whole space between Furby and Langside. It has been mentioned, but I'm going to mention it again. The City of Winnipeg, for the 2020 general assessment, the Assessment and Taxation Department has altered the approach to the non-recoverable expense allowance for commercial and industrial properties from what it has done in previous assessment cycles. Under provincial legislation, all properties in Manitoba are assessed every 2 years to ensure assessments keep pace with changing market conditions. This is confirmed in the Court of Appeal decision in Broadway Square Limited versus the assessor for the City of Winnipeg, which states, the valuation of real property in Manitoba for municipal purposes is quite complex. It is governed by the Municipal Assessment Act, SM 1989-90. The statutory scheme requires that a fresh assessment of all properties be carried out every 4th year. At that time, the frequency of general reassessments was every 4 years, opposed to the current 2-year cycle. But the statutory scheme still requires a fresh assessment when conducting a general assessment. In their non-recoverable expense study, Altus Group has included excerpts from instructional manuals or publications. Regardless of the approach, ATD has used to derive market value assessments in the past. With each general assessment, the department reviews market data and employs appropriate methods to fulfill the mandate of estimating value. To develop the 2020 general reassessment model, ATD analyzed income and expense information where management was recovered to derive model-generated net operating incomes, net of management expenses. Therefore, the model-generated NOIs developed through a fee-simple interest valuation are already net of management expenses. Based on flawed assumptions, it has been alleged that historic 5% management expense allowance was a stabilized expense involving a number of typical non-recoverable expenses relating to the property and competent operation of the property. This statement is incorrect, erroneous, and unfounded. The historic 5% management expense was an expense related to the standard management fees charged by the owner or property manager relating to the day-to-day operation of property. Further, they are usually recovered in whole or in part from tenants unless the tenants are on gross or semi-gross leases. The City of Winnipeg Assessment and Taxation Department agrees with this statement. Assessment and Taxation Department has allowed for non-recoverable expenses. Non-recoverable expenses include a general 2% expense allowance, shortfall allowance per square foot to account for non-recoverable expenses during times of vacancy. The 2% general expense allowance was always intended to include expenses incurred by a landlord that are not recovered by tenants. Those expenses could include advertising or promotion, professional fees, structural repairs, etc. Previous jargon at the Board of Revision may have referred to the 2% general expense allowance as a structural repair allowance. This jargon was overly simplified. We also have a variety of discussions on which non-recoverable expenses are included, including leasing commissions, tenant inducements, tenant improvement allowance, and free rent, is contrary to municipal board case law. There's a long-standing history of municipal board orders stating that these items should not be treated as expenses. There are 3 municipal board orders indicating this. File number 97A1076, where the relevant facts are that the tenant improvements, leasing commission, and leasing incentives are not expenses which may be used to reduce income for the purpose of calculating market value. Also file number 97A1905 and 97A1906, where the relevant facts are that tenant improvements, leasing commissions, and leasing incentives are not expenses which may be used to reduce income for the purposes of calculating market value. And these items should not be treated as expenses. I do have packages for everyone if they would like to have them in their possession and have them filed. But if not, I'm done my presentation. Thank you.
Okay, I personally think we should have a copy of that if you've read it out
Yes.
and it's relevant to the case. I think we should be, because I couldn't keep track of everything that was stated.
Did you want this applicable for all of the items?
It's only applicable to the ones where the commercial portion is questioned. And I think that is just 555 Ellis and perhaps with the river one. I'm not 100% sure, but only the ones with the commercial property is questioned.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so we will begin with your questions on the presentation of the assessor.
Yes, and I'll try and keep them brief. Let's deal with the valuation first, I guess, here. So looking at 555 Ellis, the multifamily portion, at the top of page 4 and the 4 comps there. So each of each of these properties would have considerably less bachelor units than the subject, if any, in some circumstances, right?
Yes.
And their gross floor area per unit would be greater, obviously. They probably don't have commercial portion to them, I don't think.
Actually,
Maybe one
360
does.
Cumberland does have.
Oh, Cumberland does, yes.
Yes, and it does have a fair amount, and it's 100 square feet, so it's not outrageously
Yeah.
larger.
Okay, so again, I know the time restrictions, so I just have to ask these questions. 360 Cumberland, this has been fully renovated, new kitchens, bathrooms, floors, et cetera. Is
I
that
don't know.
correct? Okay. 99 Roslyn and 372 Assiniboine are both waterfront properties.
I don't know.
Okay. Those are my questions on that. I'm assuming this is all model generated as well?
Yes.
Looking at the commercial side then, the leases provided at the bottom of page number 4, the 941 Portage Avenue is located immediately beside Shoppers and Manitoba Liquor Commission. Is that correct? It's just to the west of it. I can't think of the street that joins it there, but it's immediately west of it.
I don't know.
Okay. And again, I understand the time pressure. 912 Portage Avenue is immediately across from the Shoppers and LCC. Those are my questions. Oh, hold on, I'm sorry. So the rebuttal information, if I could just have 2 minutes just to look at this briefly. I think this was in reference to the Altus study provided. So it's difficult to ask these things as questions. And really, I don't want to get into this deeply. I think we've all heard a lot about it.
Yes.
I didn't come with a package to provide to you. My comments, I guess, would be there's a little bit of new information presented with regard to what the 5% was intended for, and how some of the comments regarding it not being representative of a management fee, but a non-recoverable or erroneous and incorrect, etc. If one takes that at face value, that means that an error was done by the city in their evaluations for all commercial properties in the city over that entire span of time by 5%, allowing a 5% allowance. I don't believe that to be the case. On just intuitively, that does not hold water. Second point would be management fees, property management fees, which is what is being discussed in that instance, have always been recoverable from the 99% of tenants under standard lease terms. As the leases are written in net properties, the property management amount is recoverable from all tenancies, with very few exceptions. In some circumstances, there are government leases where they're either they're semi-gross, where there's certain things they don't pay, including management, or there are some very powerful tenants that may not pay a management fee, but they're very, very few and far between. So in the vast majority of cases, property management fees have always been recoverable. So this has not changed over time. It wasn't different in 2006 and between 2006 and 2018. It has remained the same. So there hasn't been an update in the marketplace over that time frame. there's been no change. The comments with regard to the municipal board cases, and again, I didn't come with a package on this today as it's a small portion of what we're doing. They have been reviewed, I have looked at them, and the decisions are essentially saying not what is indicated by the city, that you can't reduce the net income by these particular categories, leasing commissions, et cetera, et cetera. What the decisions, and if you read through them in detail, what they state is that you can't reduce the top line. You can't say, okay, the tenant is paying $20 based on tenant improvements and all of these other factors. So their actual net effective rate is $15.50 or something like that. That is what is being stated in those decisions. You can't reduce the income there. It's not that they shouldn't be included on the expense side. Obviously, if it's allowed on the income side for that number to remain net, the face value of the net rate to stay at the rate that's stated, the expense side has to reflect those spends intuitively. You have to have that balance, and that's taught by the Appraisal Institute of Canada as well as other assessing organizations.
I think we'll
will
look at those if we, at our leisure.
I will leave it there. Thank you.
Okay. So we'll have questions from the panel of the assessor, Mr. Sawatsky.
No questions, thank you.
I have no questions.
I have a question on page 1 of your brief. There's an effective year on the subject property,
Yes.
79 to 89. Do you know why that is there?
No, I couldn't find any notes on that.
Do you know if it affects the capitalization rate?
It would affect the capitalization rate.
Is it fair to have it on there if you don't know where it's come from?
Just because I couldn't find any notes on it doesn't mean that it wasn't a legitimate change. I'm assuming it's in regards to some type of improvement on the property at some point, but I'm not aware of what that improvement was.
Okay. And so there's, on page 3, am I reading it correctly, there's 6 commercial units in this building? Retail units?
That's what we have on record, that there are 6. I'm not sure if, I'm not sure about the tenancy of.
But there's
6 units.
6
I'm not sure if
units,
any of
yeah.
them are combined.
Okay. And you used a capitalization rate of 5% on the apartment building, am I reading that correctly?
Yes,
And on the retail section, 8.5%?
yes.
Is that off your charts as well, the 8.5?
The 8.5, it would be in the retail section, which,
Strip, we consider it a strip maybe? Neighborhood?
not necessarily, because I'm not,
Okay.
that would have to do with the parking. The parking would be involved, with whether it's considered a strip,
Okay,
but it is on the high side of, if you look at the retail cap
High end
rates,
of the
it is on
range.
the higher side, it's not at the bottom of the range.
okay, thank you, that's all my questions. Mr. Smith, we will hear from you on this property. Please.
Okay, thank you. So, 555 Ellis is It's called Ellis Place. It's for seniors housing, owned by Manitoba Housing, and intended for seniors occupation. If you look at my page number 3, you can see that the suite mix is 104 units of bachelor apartments out of 118, with the remainder being 14 one-beds. So we have 88% bachelor units in this property. Not an attractive proposition in the marketplace as far as an investment property. The property was originally built in 79, pardon me. It has undergone a refresh since that time frame. I don't have the year on that, but it is in the last within the last 3 years prior to the valuation date, which you can see from the income and expense statements when you have a look at them. So the units themselves have been refreshed on the inside, but we'll have a look at what that standard is. The main floor of the property is programming space for the most part for the seniors. If you look at the bottom of page 5, you can see the reception area as you come in. Outdoor patio area there. Pages 6 and 7 show you the standard hallway finishes, again, very institutional. The refresh is shown on pages 6 and 7, so you have a kitchenette, kind of, essentially, with a microwave and smaller fridge, and the bachelor units are as shown with the half wall there and a small closet area. So they're on the petite side, and your standard bathroom fit out is shown on page number 8. So there's nothing deluxe about what is being done to these units. It's long lasting, essentially, is what they're intended for. The bottom of page 8 is what I was getting at. This is the main floor space, or a good portion of it, where they have services and programming for the seniors' residence. Now, that's not the entire main floor. There are 2 portions of it at either end that one could consider commercial, that could be used for a commercial nature. So we're going to treat the entire main floor as commercial, as the city has in our valuation, but that's what we're looking at essentially. Moving on to the valuation, we're looking at public housing here. Yes, it's been refreshed. It would be, in my opinion, average with regard to the marketplace for that area, certainly based on size. That would have an impact on the rental rate. So we have utilized the CMHC market averages for the area, that being $594 for the bachelors and $716 for the 1-bedrooms. Now, this gives us an average rental rate of $608 per month. That's shown on my page number 13. The actual rent geared income that they received in the last year was $375,906. And in the 2 prior years, they were going through the refresh program, so the information can't really be relied on in any of those 3 years with regard to basing a value on. Our vacancy rate is the same as the city, I believe, at 2.6% based on CMHC stats again. And as mentioned, the refresh of the property, we really don't have 3 years to base our expenses on, so we are in agreement with the city with regard to the percentage used for the expense allowance in the valuation. Moving on to capitalization rate, I'm not going to run through my same commentary with regard to cap rate. I will point out to you the location of the property on my page number 10. If you look where it is, located on Ellis Avenue there. Obviously you are heading into the west end or are in the west end there. We have, again, a property with 88% bachelor units, I believe is the figure for this particular property. Not an attractive proposition in the marketplace. So we've again applied a premium to the cap rate, and we're at 6.25% for the multifamily portion. And this gives us our final market value of $6,005,000. On the commercial side, we are using the same square footage that the city has, and really we need to look at what would be a fair rental rate for property in that area. We don't have a lot of data on Ellis Avenue rents themselves. There are some that are out there, many of them are gross. They tend to be on the low side, but again, we don't have a lot of data from that particular segment. Suffice it to say, they would be lower than your major thoroughfares. Typically, the commercial lease rates that we provide in the chart at the top of page 19 are in that $9 to $10 range. You can see they are typically on major thoroughfares. Pembina, Regent, Cavalier is a through street in St. James, and that's a shopping center. These are all typically rates out of strip malls and or shopping centers. 1271 Jefferson is a grocery anchored shopping center. And we try to keep the size in the same range as the subject property, overall commercial space of just under 6,000 square feet. So looking at the subject, certainly $15 would be well above market for what you would be able to draw to that center. So we've used $9 per square foot based on our information. 6% vacancy rate based on market stats as shown. I'll ask the panel, do you want me to run through my commentary with regard to the expense allowance or for the record, or do we need, can we skip that?
I think we could skip that.
Okay, thank you.
We've heard it before.
And I'll trust that you recall it and keep it in mind as you make your decision.
Yes.
The expense allowance that we have applied obviously is the re-inclusion of the 5% non-recoverable portion as well as the 2% structural non-recoverable portion as utilized by the city in the past and representative of the marketplace. We also include the shortfall allowance as intended in the valuation of income properties. Capitalization rate, page number 21, we include some cap rate evidence for you to review. We've used the same cap rate as the city at 8.5%. So our final market value for the commercial portion is $527,000. And the addendum material remains the same as it was in the past brief. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions?
Yes, on page 19, your comparable rents for the commercial portion, you didn't provide any comparable rents for smaller units to show economies of scale and how smaller units, what rates they could come up with, just the larger ones. Is there a reason for that?
Well, the size of the the commercial space in that building is just under 6,000. Yes, there are two, I believe, portions of that would be smaller. So there's, theoretically, yes, you might get more rent for a smaller space versus a larger one, but we're looking at vastly superior properties here in comparison to the subject, and I certainly feel that a $9 a square foot rent in that area of Ellis would be appropriate.
Okay, thank you.
That's all your questions?
Yes.
Madam, questions?
I don't have any further questions.
Mr. Solosky?
No questions, thanks.
On page 3, the paragraph at the bottom, it says 555 Ellis Avenue was developed by Manitoba Housing in 1989.
Yes,
That should be 1979?
it should be 1979, yes. As should the chart above it. The original build date was 1979. My apologies for that typo.
That's all right. Okay, well, I think everything was explained properly, questions have been asked, so I have no questions. I believe we should take a short recess. Okay, we'll call the hearing back to order. And then, Mr. Smith, going back to the last property, you have liability to taxation and classification of property. Do you want to say something about that, or are you, can we confirm that?
Yes, I will speak to it, I guess, and sorry that slipped my mind slightly. It is a seniors facility. It should be reclassified as institutional school tax exempt as its contemporaries are in the marketplace. And this is this is one of those red tape issues. The Manitoba Housing is the organization that grants the elderly and infirm persons housing licenses, and they also operate seniors residences. They do not, in the past, grant themselves elderly and infirm persons housing licenses, as they are that body. They don't apply to themselves to do it. Now, we have pointed out that they should be treated in the same manner as their contemporaries in the marketplace that provide seniors housing and are classed as institutional school tax exempt. And we've gone through a couple of cycles where this has been brought up at the Board of Revision. The city has not been in agreement, and so it has been pointed out that they don't have EIPH licenses. I have asked them to apply for those licenses from themselves and follow the procedure of making an application to the city for granting of that license, which I believe has been done, but we have also applied for the change at the Board of Revision as a protective measure. I do not have the documentation here for you today, but I believe that has all been put underway by Manitoba Housing itself. So yes, it is a seniors residence, and there are no people that would not meet the EIPH standard in the properties where we have applied for this. It's very clear with them that they have to be 100% sure that properties that we apply for it are, in fact, worthy of meeting that, that license requirement. So, yes, we are asking for that in this case.
You're asking us to change the classification to institutional?
Institutional school tax exempt. There is also the application for the liability to taxation on
Yes.
there as well. So it's not just institutional. I had that happen to us back in 2012 on a property where we had a panel that changed it to institutional but did not change the school tax exempt portion, which obviously increased the taxation load on the nonprofit organization and had to be reverted.
Once we find the values, then we will, but we'll keep it in the same percentages.
So
We would like it school tax exempt. Is that what you're saying?
That is
Under
correct.
liability.
that is correct,
And
yes.
the classification would be institutional. Do you have anything to say about that?
I've never dealt with a property that is grantable that has requested to be school tax exempt.
So,
And we don't have, well, usually we wait until we have the applications and that it's been gone through and it gets to our desk. So that's,
It's something they should maybe come to go to the department for, and the department inspects and says yes, it qualifies, or something like that.
that's the usual procedure.
so if we're in discussions, as I believe we are, so grantable, yes. Really the only organization that would be grantable and asking for this would be housing or another government entity,
Yes.
right? So it's going to be Manitoba Housing. And you'll pardon me for my exasperation, but I've been pushing for this for, I represented Manitoba Housing for 2 cycles. I don't know what happened in the last cycle. Now we're on to our 4th one, and this issue is still being fought. It's not, the service that they provide in the marketplace is identical to other nonprofits in the marketplace providing seniors housing. They meet all of the same requirements. They don't grant themselves a license because they are that entity. Now, I pointed out, all right, let's follow these guidelines. Apply to yourself for a license, grant yourself a license where it's you meet the requirements, and fill out the form with the city. To my knowledge, that has been done on, I believe, 7 properties that I'm aware of. There's a number of others outside of that I'm not representing that I do not know what they're doing on that.
7 Manitoba housing properties, sorry?
Yes, Manitoba Housing properties.
Manitoba housing has applied to itself.
That is correct.
Okay.
Because of the pushback at the Board of Revision from the city of Winnipeg saying follow the process. Well, and this is where my exasperation comes in. They don't have to grant themselves a license to operate an elderly and infirm person's housing. They are that entity. So it's a red tape thing saying you didn't meet X, so no, you don't get the same taxable taxation basis as the similar non-profit organizations in the marketplace. And I represent a number of them where they're institutional school tax exempt, where it's all seniors and that's all they provide. That is what the intent is of the legislation, and they meet all of those requirements. So I have a significant document that we've presented in the past on this. I did not bring it here today for this particular property. I will be on the remainder of them. But suffice it to say, they are in that process, and if it goes to the city and they reject it for some reason, then we're back to square one, right? So this is why we have applied to the Board of Revision for consideration of this issue. And of the 200+ Manitoba housing properties. I think there's a total of 7 that we're making this request on that would meet the requirements.
Okay, thank you.
Could I ask a question? or-
Yes, we have questions.
Okay.
If there was a private company that was not submitting the documentation, would it be dealt with the same way? Would we be requesting that they submit the documentation and adhere to the red tape?
Well, that's,
Yeah.
sorry, a question for me. So
Yes.
they wouldn't be granted, as a private organization, you couldn't run a elderly and infirm person's housing residence without having that license.
So they would need
But
to.
the answer is yes, but again, that's not the government agency that we're discussing.
Okay,
Thank you.
go ahead.
Is it not the case that most of the buildings that have an ENIPH license were actually developed under the Act originally?
Yes, they
That was
would,
the intent of the Act, is it not a development scheme?
for EIPH, yes, they
Yes.
were built with that cohort in mind and to follow that.
At the
that
very same
regulation.
time that Manitoba Housing was developing its own seniors housing.
That I couldn't definitely comment on, but I know that many of the nonprofits that I represent that have that classification were built in and around that same time in the 70s as much of the Manitoba housing.
Does that not imply that that was not the intent of the Act then, that for Manitoba Housing to have that school tax exemption?
In my reading of it, yes, it does.
That it was not the intent of the Act to give Manitoba Housing a school tax exemption?
I'm
It's what
sorry.
I'm saying. Does the fact that these types of housing were developed at the same time,
Mhm.
and one was provided under the ENIPH Act, was provided with school tax exemption, and Manitoba Housing made no attempt or did not develop under that scheme, does that not imply that the intent of the Act was never to give Manitoba Housing school tax exemption?
Well, you're asking for my comments on what the intent of the Act was, and I can't really comment on that as I wasn't
No, I'm
involved.
just saying, does it not imply that?
That.
They could have developed all of the Manitoba Housing at the same time under the same Act.
I hesitate to comment on what the intent of Manitoba Housing was back then, or the legislatures with regard to that legislation, but in looking at it equitably, so we have Manitoba Housing, which is grantable. They're exempt for all purposes, but they pay grant in lieu. So they are, and they will always pay grant in lieu. They do not make exceptions and not pay you grant in lieu. They pay their full tax on all of their properties all the time. So effectively, they are treated as market apartments. So they're paying full board tax on everything. So when they have developed a seniors facility, such as this and the others that we represent, with the intent to serve that particular cohort under the same regulations that anybody operating a nonprofit EIPH would have to meet. Is it equitable to treat them in a different manner because they're a government organization? They're still paying their full tax. They don't take advantage of being grantable and pay no tax to the city. They just want to be treated on the same basis as the same service providers do to seniors. That's all we're asking. It's not that we're looking for anything that they, we're not looking for extraordinary tax cuts or anything here. We're just looking to be treated on the same basis for this client.
Respectfully, I believe it sounds to me as though you are asking for that. They were built without that.
Well, and I
If
can't,
they
I've
have
not
it
been
granted.
around at that time or
Yeah.
involved in real estate when they were done. I can't say what the intent of either housing or the government in doing that at the time. But when you look at it now, you have seniors block A run by, I don't know, seniors, nonprofit seniors company A, and you have Manitoba Housing Building B, and they're providing the exact same service on the same street side by side.
Is it not true though, Mr.
Here.
Smith, that this is not something that the city is deciding? This is to do with a provincial act of the legislature, correct?
Well,
And the licenses are granted provincially.
the licenses are granted provincially by Manitoba Housing, yes, by Manitoba Housing themselves. Now, in order to get the exemption, so you get your EIPH license and you have to fill out the paperwork with the city and they review it and then either grant the change to institutional school tax exempt or they don't. So the process is as it is, and they are following that process now. So we're not disputing that the city, we're not disputing the regulation or who's governing it, etc. It's simply that they meet all those requirements. They're going through the process, and they should be treated on the same equitable basis. If not, then they're being singled out as being different from the rest of the marketplace.
Singled out by whom is the question?
In the taxation and assessment scheme, if you look at equitable taxation of properties out there, and you probably have considerable experience with the entities involved, I'm sure, and have perhaps knowledge historically that I do not have. But what we're looking at is the situation that the properties are in today and the regulations governing them. So what that background is, I cannot speak to any further than that.
Okay, if we,
Hopefully that's helpful.
has he answered?
Yep.
Okay. Any other questions?
No.
Mr. Sawatsky?
Yeah, just to clarify, so you're having MHRC grant themselves a license to be exempt, and then sending it to assessment for approval.
So
Is that what you're doing?
So the process, in order to get classed as institutional and school tax exempt that you have to follow, and there's a form that you have to fill out, is what is your EIPH number and various other things that have to be included on there. And that's always been the sticking point, is that, well, you don't have an EIPH number, therefore you do not qualify for it, whether the service you're providing is the same or not. So.
But they're the ones that grant them to the other private sector.
Correct, yes. So that has been the point, and we are, they have been given guidance to follow that at this point, non-intuitive as it is. They are granting themselves EIPH licenses for these and making application.
Can't they just go to their own government and deal with that internally as a government agency?
The change with regard to assessment is done through the assessment department. They have to make that
And
application.
that's a provincial organization.
No,
It's the Winnipeg
so-
and the rest
So
of
they
the
have to apply to the City of Winnipeg Assessment and Taxation Department, filling out this form with their EIPH license and the various other information in order to be granted that change in classification to institutional school tax exempt. That is the process.
It seems strange that the licensing authority would have to
License themselves.
license themselves. Who reviews that license?
They would review it themselves. Okay, I think we, just more questions?
No,
Mr.
no.
I think we know what's going, can figure this one out. So that will conclude 555 Ellis. And we will move on to item number 4, which is 433 River Avenue. Whenever you're ready.
Thank you. This is roll number 12-032460500. The assessed value is $14,004,000. We have 3 classifications with liability status on this property. We have $1,852,000 class code 60, liability status T. $11,700,000 class code 40, institutional property, liability S, school exempt. And $452,000 class code 40 with liability status of E exempt. This is a multi-use apartment building built in 1985 with 123 suites, 76 indoor parking spots, and 16 outdoor parking spots. If you look on page 2, the income value summary at the top shows 123 one-bedroom units with an average monthly rent per unit at $819. If you look at the bottom portion of that page, we have 4 different streams for income. We start with parking structure, which has a net operating income of $47,736, a capitalization rate at 7%, which gives us $682,000. This is class code 60T, so it's with the same stream as the retail, which is also 60T, with gross potential rent at $121,674, a vacancy rate at 15%, shortfall at $6.50, expense rate at 2%, so a net operating income of $92,443 with a cap rate at 7.9%, giving $1,170,000. Then the apartment portion is 40S, and that is with the $819 per unit, 123 units, giving us a gross potential rent of $1,208,844 with a 1.8% vacancy and a 50.72% expense rate, a 5% cap, giving us the $11,700,000, and then a retail section, which is class code 40E, with gross potential rent of $35,182, vacancy rate at 6%, shortfall at $6.50, expense at 2%, and a cap at 6.9%, giving us the $452,000. Okay, on page 3 we have a bit of a breakdown of the units. it shows with the 123 suites at $819 a square foot. The parking shows 39 parking stalls out of the 76 indoor and 16 outdoor. 39 stalls are considered as part of the income stream with the retail portion. And it shows the retail units. It shows that we have 7 units. On page 4, we have comparable leases for the residential portion. They range from $630 to $869. Page 5 at the top shows the recorded rental rates for parking structures. And then the bottom of page 5 is the comparable leases for the retail portion. We do have a few pages of income and expense from page 9 through to page 18. And then we have a photograph on page 19. The top of page 19 shows the map where it shows that this is on River Avenue. It's not on the corner of River and Osborne, but it's very close to the corner of River and Osborne. And then the bottom portion there is a picture of the subject property. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Smith, any questions of the assessor?
I will keep it brief. This is all model driven.
This is all model.
Okay. Looking at the parkade structure, there's been no sales of parkades essentially. There's really no parkade cap rate evidence to rely on here, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So there wouldn't be any evidence to show a change in capitalization rate for parkades over time?
I don't have any.
Those are all my questions, thank you.
Thank you. Panel, Madam, questions of the assessor?
I have no further questions, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Swatsky, questions of the assessor?
I don't think so.
Thank you.
Okay, I have a question on the retail. There's 2 income streams for the retail. Do you know what they are? What's going on there with the retail?
In the tenant list, I've got it separate here, but I'm just double checking that. On page 18, it's kind of fuzzy. But we do have a tenant that is Army, Navy, and Air Force Veterans Association.
Oh, so they're exempt? Is that where the exempt comes from?
I'm not 100% sure that that's them, but when I look at the tenant list.
That's correct.
Thank you very much. Yes.
Okay.
I was assuming that they were an exempt tenant.
Okay.
Could I ask a further question when you're finished? Sorry.
Yes.
Didn't mean to interrupt.
And total suite mix is all 1 bedrooms?
That's what we have in our records, yes.
Is that a good mix? Is that desirable to have all 1 bedrooms?
It depends on who your target audience is.
Is this the seniors? Anything to do with seniors or?
It is 40S, so it would be some type of social housing.
Social
I'm
housing.
not sure if it's seniors.
Okay. Okay, that's all my questions.
So what would drive the differences in the cap rates of the two retail streams?
That would probably be, because it's the same neighborhood, it's the same
Correct.
year built. Another factor is the size. So the difference in the cap rate there would probably be the size of the properties. Because we've got on that one, the square footage is 3,000 square feet.
Very hard to read.
Sorry. Yes, it's 3,000 square feet for the 40E, whereas the 60T retail has all the remainder of the retail area. I can add that up for you, but it's
You don't need to add it up for me.
Okay.
I see the point you're making. It just, would that not just be a construct though of the model? Because this in fact is one big retail space.
yes.
That this unit is only doing it this way because this unit goes
So-
in separately because it's school tax exempt, correct?
Yes.
Okay. There's really nothing,
There's nothing different in there,
There's
only
nothing
that
different.
in
Okay.
it's functioning as though it
Thank
is looking
you.
at that as a separate unit.
thank you. That's all my questions, sorry.
Okay, Mr. Smith, if you would like to take us through your information?
Certainly. So this one is a little complex, but I'll try and keep it concise. This is the Villa Cabrini property in Osborne Village.
Okay.
It is a nonprofit seniors organization that runs it. As you can see on the beginning of the city's brief there, they are classified institutional school tax exempt for the multifamily portion of that property. The institutional exempt portion is as described for the Legion Army Navy tenancy that has been there for some time, and the remainder of the property is class code 60 other and fully taxable. The breakdown is a little further than that, in that there is a parkade portion of the property as well, so we'll get into that description. Looking at my page number 1, just inside, you can see further detail regarding the appeal history of the subject property. We have history on the property going back through 2012. You can see the decisions for the first 2 years, as well as 2016 and 2018, which have been further appealed to the municipal board following the decisions at the Board of Revision. Total suite count for the multifamily, which we'll deal with first, is 123 units. They are 1 bedroom. They are all, it is all seniors housing, and is run by the nonprofit entity Villa Cabrini Inc. Let's go through the photos briefly here. You can see the exteriors on page number 2. Interior lobby area on page 3 at the top, and then you have, pardon me, significant common area as shown at the bottom of page number 3 for the residents. The suites themselves are as shown on page number 4, with the build out as it is. The cabinetry is of that Euro style when those were in fashion, and the flooring has been updated in some cases, but the majority has not, from is my understanding in discussions with the property management. So there is some of that harder wearing laminate flooring in a few of the units, but much of it is original. And you can see the build out of the rest of it on page number 5. Then we get into commercial on page 6. There is a Mexican food restaurant in one of the units, as shown at the top of page 6. There is a smaller pharmacy located in there as well, shown on the bottom of page 6. Then we have the Army-Navy tenancy, which is shown on page number 7, including their kitchen area there as well. Description of the improvements is on page number 8. They have had some deferred maintenance issues. I believe they've dealt with their roofing issue at this point. They have had significant issues with windows with water penetration, and we're looking at replacement of those windows. The suites themselves are dominantly original and would typically require some upgrading. They're also on the smaller side for one-bedroom units in the marketplace as well. And that's in order to accommodate the maximum number of people in the property. The site is shown on page number 9. It is located just to the east of Osborne Street on River Avenue on the north side. It's not right on the corner. Adjacent to it is that gas station theater was, and then there's that little strip mall there as well to the west of this. So the location is shown on page number 10. So it is in Osborne Village. It's not adjacent to Shoppers, MLCC, the Liquor Commission, etc. You've got that. Osborne Village is an interesting area. You have a segment of it that can command significant rents, and as you move beyond that, they don't tend to drive the same amount of rent. And whether you have parking available or not is also an issue. There's parking on site, obviously, but it's underground. You have to drive around through the back lane to get at it. So it's not like a strip mall location where one drives in and parks and goes in to shop. So let's look at the valuation of the property. We'll deal with the multifamily first. The scheduled rent for all of the units as of the valuation date was $777 for the one-bedroom units. This produces $1,146,852 in gross rental income. The property's operated on rent care to income basis, so as a check, we looked at combining the actual rental revenue that they receive as well as the MHRC contribution, and this came to $1,100,481, so slightly under what the $777 per unit would produce. Now, is this market is the question. So we looked at the marketplace and compared the subject to that. And you can see our chart at the bottom of page 13. These are comparable properties to the subject. And you can see the rental range there is between $725 and $795. I'll point out that 404 de Salaberry is another similar nonprofit seniors organization with a tower providing seniors housing. Their one bedrooms are at $768 for that time frame. The St. Michael Road is well located in the St. Patel area. Significant property on Pembina, Corridon. These are all well-located properties in and around that Osborne, Grant, Corridon area for the most part. So our average there is $766. So we believe that their $777 is at market. So we've used the in-place rental scheme to come up with the overall gross rent of $1,146,852. Looking at the additional revenue. We have 3 years of laundry revenue as shown at the bottom of page 14. And we have included an amount for laundry in the final valuation as well. Moving on to vacancy. Based on CMHC stats, we have used a vacancy rate of 2.6%, which is in keeping with CMHC stats. The expense allowance for the property, you can see that we have gone through a 3-year history of the property and stabilized the expenses for the valuation date. Our stabilization brings the expenses down from where they were at to $576,244. Their actual expenses were in and around $730,000, $750,000 for the prior 3 years. Looking at capitalization rate, I'm not going to run through my commentary regarding this again. Suffice it to say, it is, we have the same issues with this property as we would with the Manitoba housing properties in regard to the same risk issues. You have tenants that are in place on rent geared to income and are entitled to stay there on those terms to the end of their lease. If you're purchasing the property, obviously that has an impact on the desirability of that property, as well as all the other issues we've already discussed. Looking at the subject, we have an entire building of 1-bedroom units. They're on the smaller side. Furnishings are a little bit dated. They're not in bad condition, they're just dated. So we have applied the upper end of the range at 6% to the income stream for the multifamily section. Now, again, it's all 1-bedroom units. Yes, it's located in Osborne Village, but there are those, the smaller size of the units, the build out, etc. Would it fall towards the lower end of the investment grade? No, it would not. It would be at the top end. So we're at 6% for the valuation. This gives us market value of $9,203,000. If you look at the bottom of page number 3, you can see that this is summarized in comparison to the city's valuation and the city's valuation in the last cycle. The city has changed their cap rate, dropping it from 5.25% to 5%. We really see no evidence of that in the marketplace. Moving on to the commercial portion of the property. Page number 20 in the report, the actual rents in place are shown at the top of page number 20. I've separated out the Legion, Army, Navy for ease of comparison. It's the 3,161 at the bottom of that chart. We have provided our rental comparables at the bottom of page 20 onto page 21. These are all well-located retail properties. The rental rate range for the subject is in that $11.25 up to maximum $15.80 with a kind of a concentration in the 12 to 14 range, I would say. The subject in comparison to the comparables that are out there, Osborne Village again is unique. It does not necessarily drive the same revenue for tenancies as you would get in strip malls that are well located on main thoroughfares, depending on the mall and the location. Obviously, the comparables that we've provided you there are typically from well-located malls, and they are certainly supportive of the rental rates that are in place for the subject. Pardon me. So we believe the in-place rental structure is at market. Again, if you're to buy the property, this is the rental stream that you would get. You do not get additional income because it's not in place on the lease. Any change would have to occur when the lease would expire, and only if the market would support it. They have had a history of difficulties in renting these units out in past cycles, so they don't drive a lot of rent in this particular location. Vacancy, we've used 6% as shown. Our expense allowance is the 5 and 2%, as well as the shortfall allowance. Moving on to cap rate. As noted earlier, I believe you're not going to have a different cap rate for the different components of the retail. The city is at 7.9 and 6.9%. The cap rates that we have for retail, as shown at the top of page number 23, range between that 7.1 and 9.1%. Given the past history for the property, difficulty in leasing the units out, the rental scheme that they're getting, lack of parking, location, etc., we believe 8.5% is applicable to the subject. So we've used 8.5% in our valuation. So you can see both the taxable and the school tax exempt portions on the bottom of page number 23. Moving on to the parkade portion of the property. Our valuation is based on the actuals for the property. So what we have done, top of page 24, is summarize the past 5 years of revenue and expenses for you. So the first figure for 2013 there of $31,749 is their net income. Then in brackets you have the gross income less the expenses, giving you the net income. So net income has ranged between $31,000, $45,000, $35,000, $37,000, and $37,464 over the last 5 years. So relatively stable within that range, particularly in the last 3 years, I would say. So using this net income, we have capitalized that at the same cap rate that was applied in the 2018 cycle, as really there is no change in that market for parkades. There have been no sales, there is no evidence to support any change in cap rate for parkades. So we've applied 7.5%, giving us the market value of $500,000 for the parkade portion. And to make everything comparable, we've combined these as appropriate on page number 25 to give you the final market values. Multifamily portion being $9,203,000, institutional school tax exempt. The other taxable being the parkade and the non-Legion portion of the retail being $1,540,000, and the Legion portion being $376,000. And I've included the various income and expense information needed to verify this in the back, as well as the other information provided on the other briefs. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions?
You mentioned a couple times the difficulty with parking because they need to drive around to the back to park.
Oh, yes, sorry, they have 2 entrances to it. There is a front entrance as well, my mistake.
Thank you. That's all.
Okay. Mr. Sawatsky?
That's another complicated one. I have no questions, thanks.
Okay.
I have one for the assessor. Looking at your parking analysis, you actually, between 2018 and 2020, have significantly increased the parking revenue.
Sorry, which?
I'm looking at the applicant's evidence, but he's provided your information as well as a 2018 comparison. So it's on page 24. Page 24.
Okay,
Yeah,
yes,
right there. So 2020 is what you provided in your brief.
yes.
He's also provided 2018, significant increase in the parking revenue, and I'm just wondering what would drive that.
That was modeled, and it was based on the analysis done by the parking lot specialist.
So this would just be based on what other
The revenue that is included, like the,
other parking lots are making this kind of revenue on average, sort of thing, right?
yes.
Okay, thank you. That's all my questions.
Thank you. Bottom of page 3, the picture at the bottom of page 3 of your brief, that's the sort of residence meeting area?
That's correct.
That's not any in the commercial space? or
It's not.
Okay. Well, I think that, I don't have a lot of questions. Thank you. That will conclude number 433 River Avenue.
May I ask the panel a question on camera? Is that allowed? It's regarding one of the properties today. It's something that you should probably consider, that's all. It's information that I don't necessarily want to put on camera to the public for a particular reason,
We'll take a short recess then.
if that makes sense.
Yes. I call the meeting back to order. And we will begin by dealing with 320 Austin Street North.
This is roll number 14022950000. We have split classification on this one with 598,000 at class code 20, liability is grantable, and 459,000 at class code 60 with liability grantable, giving us the $1,057,000 assessed value. This is a multi-use apartment. We have actual years built at 1985 to 2002 with 10 suites and 10 outdoor parking spots. On page 2, we have the income value summary. 8 of the units are 2-bedroom and 2 of the units are 3-bedroom. Average monthly rent per unit is $676.24. The apartment portion of the property has a vacancy rate at 2.4%, expense rate at 59.26%, and a capitalization rate at 5.4%, giving us the $598,000. And the office space has a gross potential rent of $43,600 with a vacancy rate at 5.5%, shortfall rate at $7, expense rate at 2%, and a capitalization rate at 8.3%, giving us the $459,000. On page 3, we have a breakdown of the units. The apartment has the 10 suites at $676.24, and the office residential converted space has 5,932 square feet at $7.35 per square foot, giving us the potential rent of $43,600. We have comparables on page 4, and income information on page 8 with a picture on page 9, showing that this is at the corner of Austin and Pritchard. with a map above to show the location. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Smith, any questions?
Just briefly, this is all model driven.
Yes.
Given time constraints, I forgot to ask this earlier, you haven't been able to see the properties here today.
I have not seen any of the properties or any of the comparable properties.
Just quickly, with regard to the bottom of page number 4 of the comparable leases, the 995 Main Street, that is the strip mall with the Manitoba Liquor Commission and Taco Bell, is it? Just at the Redwood Bridge there, I believe. Anyway. Sorry. Have to ask the question.
Yep.
The other one fronts on Main, the second one, and so 85 Sutherland would be the only property that would be off Main in Point Douglas there, correct? Not on a main thoroughfare.
I believe so.
Okay. Those are all of my questions, thank you.
Thank you. Madam?
I don't have any further questions.
Mr. Swatsky?
No questions.
Well, I have a question on the effective date, original 1985, and changed to 2002. Do you know why? Any notes or anything about that?
No.
No? And do you think that would change the capitalization rate if, from a 1985 to 2002, would that change the effect capitalization rate?
It shows here that we have 2 buildings, so it is possible that we've got the 1985 on one building, and even if it's not an entirely separate building, if it was built at a separate time, it was added on as a new building, so then it would influence.
Okay, so you're saying one building was built in 1985, one building in 2002? Is that-
That's a guess.
Okay. By the picture, it looks like, where's the picture? Looks like it's all one building now.
Yes, but when, if somebody does an addition and puts a new roof on at the time of the addition, it would be hard to say. But like I said, I'm just guessing by what I've seen in the.
Okay. Thank you, that's all my questions. Mr. Smith, your presentation.
Okay, thank you. Just on that note, I'll take you to my page number 10, which gives you the site aerial. So the main building was built in, and it's all one building as they're attached, but the main portion of the building, residential, was built in 85, and then at the top, you can see that little bump out there, which would be the 2002 addition to the building at that time. So it's a relatively small portion of it. So,
Thank you.
moving on to valuation or subject property, 320 Austin Street. It is Manitoba Housing owned property, and again operated on a rent geared income basis. The the suite breakdown that we have from Manitoba Housing itself, and we confirmed all of these with them, is 4 bachelors, 4 2-bedrooms, and 2 3-bedrooms. So slightly different than what the city has, I guess, in their records of 8 2-bedrooms and 3 2-bedrooms. So I'm not sure where that may have changed over time. I'm not certain what the detail is there, but it is 4 bachelors, 4 2-beds, and 2 3-beds in this property. It is operated on a rent geared to income basis, and at the time of inspection was fully vacant. They aren't intending to sell it, to my knowledge. I believe they're perhaps looking at doing some changes to the interior, upgrades, etc. The property itself is in below average condition. The interiors date to that 85 time frame and have had significant wear and tear over that time frame, such that we would term it as being below average in terms of condition. You can see the photographs of the property on the pages 4 through 9, I believe, some exteriors, some of the interiors, and obviously it shows the state of those. With regard to what's termed the commercial portion of the building, it's really not a commercial portion of the building. It's an area that's used to provide services to the residents of the property. It would not get leased. It is there, and for the purposes of our valuation today, we have assigned a value to it. However, I think moving forward, perhaps it's something that the city and ourselves can look at as to whether there's truly a value to be attributed to it, so we can have that discussion following this at some time. I'll direct your attention to page 11 and the location of the property. So 320 Austin Street, pardon me, is in the Point Douglas area to the east of Main Street. So it's in that Point Douglas neighborhood. Point Douglas, and I'm not sure if I included the stats here as I have in some other properties. Point Douglas is an area with significant socioeconomic issues. Incomes are considerably well below the norm in the city of Winnipeg. Unemployment is higher. Government subsidies and transfers are higher in this area. Home ownership is obviously very low, and rentals being higher, etc. We do have stats on that. I see that they weren't included in this particular brief, but that is the neighborhood that the property is located in. Obviously, this has an impact on rental rates as well as the desirability of the property, both from tenancy point of view as well as from an investor's point of view and what they would be willing to pay for it. So let's move on to the valuation itself. Subject property, we provide on the income side the CMHC stats on page number 13. And the averages for bachelors and 2 bedrooms. The suites are not particularly large and they are in bad condition. There is no 3-bedroom average amount, as 3 bedrooms are relatively rare in the marketplace. There is no 3-bedroom average amount provided by CMHC, given the location of the property and the condition of them. We've used the same rent as for the 2 bedrooms. Again, keep in mind that the units are smaller as well as where it's located. So we've used the averages less 5% for size, condition, and finishing. So this gives us a gross annual rental income of $73,598, which is $613 a month. And you can see that broken down on the chart on page number 14. I think this is representative of what a tenant would be getting renting in that particular property in that location. Our vacancy rate on page 15, based on CMHC, we have used 2.4%, and our expense allowance. We went through the exercise of stabilizing the expenses for the property and arrived at $105,344. Obviously, this is above the income that would be generated for the property. So the property was in fact losing money. So we can't rely on that figure in arriving at a market value. So we have deferred to the city's expense allowance percentage in our valuation. So looking at capitalization rate for the subject property, we have a property that's in below average condition. It has smaller units, ton of wear and tear, currently vacant. It has both bachelor's and 3-bedroom units, which are, again, unusual, more unusual in the marketplace and less desirable, less easily rentable. I'm not going to run through our cap rate data again. Suffice it to say, the same issues are at play here. Beyond that, we're located in, again, that Point Douglas area. And just the, again, the socioeconomic issues that are present there would have an impact on what an investor would be willing to pay on the marketplace for a property in this location. So all of those factors taken into account, we've used a 7% capitalization rate, which gives us a market value of $418,000. On the portion that's termed commercial, this is, again, a challenging one. It's really not space that would get leased on the marketplace, given where it is and what it is. It's just a service provision area for the property. We have given you some indication of what rents are for lower grade retail. We have a property at 883 Notre Dame that's operated on a gross rent basis. You can see we've come down to net rents for that property. They range in that $5 to $6 to $7 range. We have a couple of other properties. Office space, 2015 Portage, rental rate of $4 a square foot in 2015. 201 Portage, this is an interesting one, rented in 2015, 3,000 square feet for $5 a square foot on a 5-year term. A couple of others there. We have to put a rental rate on this. I think $5 a square foot is more than reasonable for the property. To this, we've applied the 5.5% vacancy for retail valuation, and our standard deductions for the expense allowances, the 5%, the 2%, and the shortfall allowance, and capitalization rates. We have applied a 9% cap rate. Again, this is not commercial space, it's not going to lease, it would draw a significant premium, so we've capped it at 9%, which gives us a market value of $266,000. And that is my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Questions of the applicant? Martins?
On page 6 and 7, are any of those photos of the commercial space?
6 would be, yes. The bottom of 6 would be the commercial space, as I recall. And perhaps the top of page 7 too. I'm trying to remember. It's been a few months since I was there.
Is this space, are you able to close it off from the residential portion of the property?
As in, is it demised separately?
At all?
Not entirely, I don't believe.
No. Okay, thank you. That's everything.
Mr. Slawski, questions?
No questions.
I have no question.
You were at the property?
Yes.
The property? And it was totally vacant?
It was.
It is.
It is, yeah. I haven't been by since we looked at it in the summertime.
How long had it been vacant at that time, do you know?
I didn't get a response on how long the vacancy bid in place, but they're obviously considering what they're doing with property, I believe. Yeah, but there's no indication that they're going to sell it.
And the suite mix was different. You said you got that information from the managers, or?
Yes, from the manager of the building itself.
Okay, thank you very much. We will, that will conclude 320 Austin. Then we'll move on to item number 6, 355 Kennedy Street.
This is classification too.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, this one coming up, yes. Oops.
Okay. This one is roll number 13053019000. Our assessed value is $12,576,000. We have $12,040,000 of that classified as 20 residential, which is grantable, and $536,000 classified at 40 institutional. Liability status is exempt. This property was built in 1977 with 140 suites, 51 indoor parking spots. On page 2, we have a breakdown. There's 91 bachelor units, 4 one-bedroom, and 45 two-bedroom, with an average monthly rent per unit at $785.17. For the apartment portion, we have a 3% vacancy rate, a 52.95% expense rate, and a 5% cap, giving us the $12,040,000. And for the retail portion, we have 3,451 square feet at $12.06, giving us the potential rent at $41,619, with a vacancy rate of 6%, a shortfall rate at $6.50, an expense rate at 2%, and a cap at 6.9%, giving us the $536,000. Page 4, we have some comparables. The residential comparables range from $731 to $880 per unit. And the comparable leases for the retail portion range from $10 per square foot to $13.88 per square foot. And we have income information on page 8 and 9. And a picture on page 10. The map at the top shows the location. And the picture on the bottom shows the unit. It is the, on Kennedy, so facing, we're facing the front of the unit. And it has the 357 and 355 on the front. Thank you.
Thank you.
Excuse me.
Mr. Smith, if you have questions, you're welcome to ask.
Okay, just a couple, looking at page 4 and the rental costs that are there, comparables 1 and 2. There's no bachelor units in either of those?
No, there aren't.
Okay, so that would tend to drive a higher overall average rent.
Yes.
Number 3, that's a waterfront location, I believe, on the same one.
I'm not sure.
Okay. And then 500 Portage Avenue, that would be Colony Square across from University of Winnipeg.
Sorry, I'm not sure.
I'm sorry, yeah.
Yeah.
So just, and it's difficult to ask these as questions, so that property was, has a portion that's an office tower, it has indoor parking, arcade, and the suites were renovated. That's all I can't ask it as a question.
Well, yeah, that's why it would command a higher rent.
Those are all of my questions.
Thank you. Panel members? Mr. Swansky? Questions?
I'm trying to understand the location on your map. What's that building below the subject property that's got that dome and looks like glass dome? Any idea? I'm trying to get my head around where this thing's in.
Yes, what used to be the lab, right?
Oh, okay. I know, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I should have researched the council.
No other questions?
I have no question.
Does the location affect the cap rate of
Yes, it
the
does.
5%? Yes, so it being, how would you say, down in the downtown area?
Yes, that is factored into the model.
So this would be considered as desirable area for renting, that's why 5%. I think my other questions have been asked, so that's good, thank you. Mr. Smith, if you'd like to take us through your brief.
Sure, I'll just, I'll start. This one, if it was filed for a classification change and exemption from taxation, that was an error on the applicant's part. It's not one of the ones that should be on the list for that, so please don't consider that.
Okay, that's fair, thank you.
To that end, if you look at page number 6, you can see the daycare portion of the building at the top of the photograph there. So looking at subject property 355 Kennedy, we have a slightly different unit count, again, directly from the property manager of the building. There are 90 bachelor units, 5 one-bedroom units, and 45 two-bedroom units. This is shown on my page number 3. The size of them is quite small. As with many Manitoba housing properties, they're trying to put as many people in, house as many people as they can in their facility. So the bachelor units are 378 square feet. The one beds are 469 square feet, and the two beds are 770 square feet. So they're certainly under market norms for those particular unit types. It is, again, a Manitoba housing property and is operated on a rent geared to income basis. So looking at property itself, there's a bit of description for the property on page number 4. They have had a refresh of the suites since it was constructed in 1977, so you can see that from photos. And however, it is listed on the bed bug registry, and you have an ongoing issue with that, but they obviously treat them as most places, many apartments have to these days. It is a significant issue here, but they do obviously make the effort to eradicate them. Moving on to the photos, page number 5 gives you an exterior as well as a picture of the parking area. And then we can move into the property itself. You can see the standard kind of institutional nature of the hallways, etc. There is some space that is used internally As you can see at the top of the page there's a daycare that is used. And then you have the suites themselves as shown on page number 7 and 8. Not everything is entirely refreshed, as you can see, but the flooring is new, the cabinetry was redone, etc. Pardon me. The site is shown on page number 9, and the location, just to give you a better sense of it, is shown on page number 10. So yes, it is just to the east of that federal government facility. I forget the agency that ran it, but the one that was mentioned previously there. So it's located to the north of Portage Place, across Ellis on the east side of Kennedy Street, in that kind of Central Park area. The valuation of the property itself, again, it's run on rent geared income, so there's no in-place rent to rely on. We have looked at the average rents for the area, that being Centennial, and we have applied those to the subject. Now, yes, it has been refreshed, but the units are quite small, so certainly the average would be applicable in my estimation for this property. This gives us an average rent of $781 a month, and it's broken out on page 13 there for you. Now, to this, we have added the parking income, the laundry income, and in this case, they have roof lease income as well, which if you were to buy the property would continue on, obviously, so we've included that in our valuation. The vacancy rate we've applied is 3%, in keeping with the market on page 14, CMHC stats, and our expense allowance stabilization is shown on page number 14, where we run through 3 years of history and stabilize it for the valuation date. This gives us an expense allowance of $735,759 based on the actual expenses of the property. This gives us a net operating income of $575,087, about $27,000 less than the city's net operating income. Let's look at capitalization rate. So the property was built in 1977. They have had a refresh of the suites at this point. It has been my experience that you can refresh the suite. Typically, this does not stay in pristine condition in Manitoba housing facilities, and they tend to have wear and tear relatively quickly. So the fact that it's refreshed does not necessarily mean it will stay in that condition for a normal length of time. Looking at the suite breakout for the subject, again, we're looking at a very high percentage of bachelors here, 90 out of 140. We have smaller units. We're located in that Central Park area, again, an area that has its social challenges. And so we have capitalized the subject property at 6% for this particular facility. It's a relatively recent build. It has parking attached to it, etc. So we felt that 6%, given all of these factors, would be appropriate. This gives us $9,585,000 for the multifamily portion of the building. On the commercial side, I can run through that if you wish. It is exempt, and our valuation of it comes to a slightly higher value than the city at $579,000, as we have capped it at the same 6% that you would acquire the entire property for. It's a 3,400 square feet. You wouldn't apply a different rate to that. So
Okay, yeah.
I'll leave it at that. The agenda should be the same as in the past briefs. Thank you.
Thank you. Martins, questions of the applicant?
No, thank you.
Panel members? Bad? No?
No questions.
I have a question on page 14 on your stabilization chart. The stabilized number of 735,000 is higher than the other three. How did
It is.
this?
So in Manitoba Housing's income statements that they provide to the city and to ourselves, there is no allowance for property management. They don't pay themselves a property management fee. So in the open market, obviously, there'd be property management that would be applicable. This is a absolute market standard. So we've simply applied 5% of effective gross income in our stabilization. At the bottom there, you can see the 65.
Okay, I didn't see
542.
that number. I was wondering how it can
Yeah,
possibly,
that's what the difference is.
okay. Okay, and you were at the property?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, that's all my questions. And that will take us to item number 7, 400 Logan Avenue. When you're ready.
This is roll number 13081753300. The assessed value is $1,811,000. This is split between $1,455,000 at class code 20, residential 2, with a liability status of grantable, and $356,000 at class code 60, other property, with a liability status of grantable. This is a multi-use apartment building. It was built in 1985 with 18 suites and 5 outdoor parking spots. On page 2, there's the income value summary. It shows that the breakdown of the suites is 8 one-bedroom suites, 9 two-bedroom suites, and 1 three-bedroom suite, with an average monthly rent per unit at $779.66. If we look at the apartment valuation, we have a vacancy at 3%, expense rate at 55.46%, and a cap at 5%, giving the $1,455,000. And on the retail side, there's 935 square feet at $10.17 per square foot, and 2,665 square feet at $9.32 per square foot, giving a gross potential rent of $34,347 with a vacancy rate at 6%, a shortfall rate at $6.50, an expense rate at 2%, and a capitalization rate at 8.5%, giving $356,000. We have some comparables on page 4, and the income information that was submitted to the department on page 8 through 10, and photos on page 11, showing a map showing that this property is at the corner of Logan and Ellen, and an overhead view from the back, and an overhead view from the front. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Smith?
I have no questions.
No questions. Panel members, questions?
I have no questions.
Mr. Swansky?
No questions.
I have a question. You're using a cap rate of 5% on the apartment side.
Yes,
This property is located on Logan Avenue.
yes.
Was, if I remember right from the last reassessment, something, the assessment department had certain areas where they bumped up the cap rates in, does this qualify in that area? Has the cap rate been, has the area affected this cap rate?
The area has been taken into account in the cap rate. I'm not sure if there is an increase for this neighborhood. Remember too that this one was built in 1985, so I'm not sure what the influence would be for either of those. But those would both influence the cap rate.
I was thinking that they had certain areas flagged that they just added whatever 0.5% or something right across.
Yes, they do.
Yeah. But this property being at 5%, to me, that hasn't had much of a bump up. Have you been at the property?
No.
Do you know anything about the retail? Is it 7-Eleven or something, a little store, or?
I have a tenant list. Maybe I don't have a tenant list. Oh. No, I don't know who the tenants are.
I will ask Mr. Smith when time comes.
Thank you.
Thank you. If you would like to take us through your information, Mr. Smith?
Certainly. I have been to the property. I don't recall there being tenants in the commercial space at this point. Now, I've seen quite a few of these. And I didn't walk through each portion of that commercial entity, but I don't remember there being ones there. I'm not disputing the commercial valuation in any case.
Okay.
With regard to 400 Logan, so just get you to flip to my page number 9. It's located at the corner of Logan and Elm. I'm not quite sure what you would call that area. It's one block from Higgins and the CPR tracks on the west side of Main Street there, heading towards the bridge over the CPR tracks. Not the greatest area of Winnipeg. I would consider it marginally better than the north side of the tracks. Well, somewhat better than the north side of the tracks, but certainly an area that would draw lesser interest from investors in the marketplace, probably as well as tenants. What you find with Manitoba Housing often is that their mandate is to provide housing to residents of Winnipeg and Manitoba in areas where they're needed, so they end up building in these locations where you wouldn't find somebody else building a property of this nature in 1985 or today. So that's essentially what we're looking at. The property itself has 7 one-beds, 8 two-beds, for a total of 15 units, built in 1985. The photos of this are following it. I would consider it to be in average condition. Again, the finishes that Manitoba Housing puts in are of a base level, are meant to be lasting. So you can see the cabinetry there at the bottom of page 6. That unit probably had damaged cabinetry that had to be replaced. You have the older stove at the top and tile flooring, et cetera. So that's what it looks like. I considered it to be in average condition when I went through it. So looking at the valuation of the property, I'll try and save us a bit of time here. The model in this case, as well as our valuation, come out to be remarkably similar. Ours is based on the CMHC averages for the Centennial area with no deduction for condition or size, as we didn't think that was appropriate. Very similar to the city's income level, about $1,000 difference. We went through the expenses. Our vacancy rate that we've applied is the same as the city. Our expenses, stabilized expenses, come to $113,314. That would be certainly above what one would feel would be appropriate in the analysis of this, as that represents 68% of the effective gross income. So we have deferred to the city's expense allowance percentage of 55.46. And our NOI ends up being about $1,000 higher than the city's, so very similar. The capitalization rate, again, we're looking at, certainly location is a factor for this property and for most of the other ones that we're looking at here today. We have applied a premium of a quarter point to the top end of the standard 5 to 6% capitalization rate range that you see from the market participants. Our evidence shows that 5.5 to 6.5% roughly. We've placed the subject at 6.25%. It's relatively newly built in a below average location. We've applied 6.25% as reflective of all of these details, giving us $1,180,000 in value for the multi-residential portion, and we're not disputing the valuation on the commercial side of the property. Thank you.
Thank you.
No questions?
No questions? Mr. Swansky?
No question?
Just a clarification, Mr. Smith, your table on page 17, I believe the market rents that you have in there are actually incorrect. They don't work, and they're not the same as what the city has in their brief.
On page 17?
Yeah, the city's market
Oh.
rent is $779. I think it just must be a.
Yes, that's, I'm sorry, that 940 is part of a spreadsheet and did not get changed. So if you go through the calculations on my page 12 where the
Yeah.
actual averages are, it does work. So the 940 is incorrect.
That's what
Yeah, I apologize for that.
That's what it's a 936. So yeah.
We probably forgot to change the unit count in
Okay,
determining
that's all my
that average.
questions.
I have a question of the unit count. You're showing a different count than the assessor is showing? You have
Yes, we are.
15 units, 7 one and 8 two-bedroom units, and the assessor's showing, for a total of 15, and the assessor's showing 18 units.
Yes, so this, again, this is directly from the property manager for the property itself. They have the counts, they do not the leasing, but the filling of the spaces with the tenants, the residents.
Okay.
And this isn't a situation where it's multiple townhouse buildings or anything, it's one block, so they didn't make any error in that.
Pretty easy for them to figure it out.
I'm not sure what the 3 additional, again, probably a detail that we need to look at.
Okay. I would just ask the assessor quickly if you have any comment on the discrepancy of the units?
When we were getting the information from the owner of the property, they're not giving us any information in regards to tenancy. They're just giving us, like the expenditures. So
Okay.
yeah.
So in fact, Mr. Smith, your rent on page 17 is correct, if you do it by the 15.
Yes,
It's the difference is the number of units.
you had me right there.
And there's also just for clarification, on page 18, where you've given your final estimate of value, the written other is different, 238,000 it says, where you
Yes.
really have 356 in there.
My apologies, that was
Okay.
probably a relatively late night.
The 356 is the right number then?
It is, yes.
Okay. That's all my questions. Any summation?
No, thank you.
No, thank you.
Any summation? Okay, that concludes the hearing.
Thank you.
Thank you both for coming.
Thank you.